So I'm really excited to be here, and I would say I'm mostly trained as a geophysicist, but I am been introduced to the world of discipline-based education research, and I'm really excited to sort of delve into that and go towards that direction. So this is sort of my talk about exploring those, starting to explore discipline-based education research. So I titled this talk Epicenters in Geoscience from Intern to Workforce. And epicenters are sources of earthquakes, but here maybe it's a source of a pathway into geoscience. And I want to start with a huge acknowledgement to the IRIS Consortium. And so this is IRIS stands for Incorporated Research Institutions for Seismology. It's a national consortium of universities. And they run this internship program that we're going to look at the data from. And so my main collaborator there has been Michael Hubenthal. So first, a little introduction about geoscientists, and we need geoscientists. And so that's a lot of reason why we have been really pushing internship programs. But the geosciences, they're actually, this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they are predicting a higher increase, percentage change of employment in the next 8 to 10 years, more than other physical scientists. So here, physical scientists is at 10%, and geoscientists are at 14%. And this comes from demand for like environmental concerns, energy needs, things like that. Additionally, geoscience has like little exposure in high schools, and it's often considered remedial. Another issue in geoscience is diversity, and actually on the gender front, we are doing fairly well for the geosciences. You can see male in the dark blue and female in the orange. So there's about a 50-50% ratio at the bachelor's degree level, the master's degree level, and the PhD level. So that's exciting for us. The downside for diversity in the geosciences is that we are the least diverse ethnically and racially of all the STEM disciplines. So here's geoscience here, Earth, Atmospheric, and Ocean Sciences. And that's the bachelor's, master's, and PhD level. So you can see here that we are doing maybe worse than physical science, worse than mathematics. So this is something that's really concerning to our field, and certainly an issue that we want to try and address with strong internship programs. So overall, undergraduate research in STEM is associated with positive outcomes like increased retention, maybe increased GPA, and increased rates of graduate school matriculation. Additionally, students report enhanced skills of thinking like a scientist, increased intellectual curiosity, maybe oral and written communication. Specifically in the geosciences, some of the literature cites increases in self-efficacy, maybe looking at associations with mentors and role models, or creating a sense of belonging. Additionally, career knowledge is really important for geoscientists. It's not very often, especially in an urban environment, that you know what a geologist is or what a geoscientist does with their degree. So this study focuses on the IRIS internship program. And this is a summer REU program that's funded by the National Science Foundation. It starts with a 1-week orientation that's face-to-face. Students get short courses on technology. They also install a sensor in the ground. They also just go on hikes and hang out together. They begin to do a little bit of independent research. But then after that 1-week orientation, they are placed in the summer remotely. So they go to different spots across the US and sometimes internationally, and then they work with their science mentor. So there's a cyber infrastructure to keep the interns sort of connected throughout the summer. Then at the end of the internship program, they often present their research results at an international conference. And so the conference is actually over 20,000 people that the undergraduates get to interact with and share experiences with. Throughout the whole experience, they're assisted by an alumni mentor. And so that's someone who's been through the program, is often in graduate school. So they help especially answer like technical questions or logistical questions. They're kind of just a mediator to the whole program. The internship program is celebrating its 20th year this year. So it started in 1998 with just a few interns here. And in black you have the total number of interns per year. In light blue you have the number of female participants. And then in green you have the number of underrepresented minority participants. They just started collecting the underrepresented minority group participants in 2009. And so you can see that the internship program has been growing. Additionally, oftentimes the base level NSF funding is about 10, but people in the community have found it to be a really successful program. So independent PIs have been putting in for funding to have one of their students be a part of this program because they have found it to be so useful. So this is just a little bit about the outcomes, and they've been able to do this through tracking, and they actually have a really strong response rate. At least for me, it seemed really strong. So there's been 144 total interns at this time. It's just a snapshot. 25 of those we don't know. We didn't get any responses. But from that, we know that at that time, 9 students were pursuing their bachelor's degree. 12 students were pursuing their master's degree. 57 had already entered their workforce, and 41 at that time were pursuing their PhD. So looking through this graph, it's about 82% of former interns are pursuing geoscience degrees or are currently in the geoscience workforce. So this brings me to my own pathway. And so I was an intern in 2007. And so I took the internship. I went on to my bachelor's degree, and then I got a PhD, and now I'm in the workforce. So this is why this project was sort of especially motivating for me. And I'm excited to sort of see how other students are moving through the pathway. So that brings me to a little pause moment to think about our own academic pathways. I assume everyone is a graduate student at least. So maybe take 2 minutes, and I just want to talk to your neighbor about your academic pathway. Did you have a transformative experience? Any mentors, or did you have a social support network? What do you think were variables that helped you persist in academia?
Well, I was that I was part of my issue with the first chapter with not relating. I was an issue with my but not getting into it. It's like I've never been a person that like did.
Yeah, I didn't even start. I didn't start going to college
as a
until I was
mentor or as a mentee.
This is what I'm interested in. He said, actually, you might want to check out this guy named Mike Stipe. Yeah, so that was the connection.
Dan was at Debug applying to college. I was there.
And I went to graduate school.
a very positive experience.
For about because I was running business, I was teaching other people in very close. So I had all of those skills that I was mentoring other people, and I did this as
Trying to figure out more or less.
So I keep saying that's the thing that's prepared me for a PhD more than anything should be having a house.
I had no idea that this was an
It
topic.
started from learning everything, so it was that like
Before I was a teacher, I just learned.
and essentially after
I had no idea it existed. I thought about grad school maybe at some point,
there will be some
but
results from
I
this
was like,
education.
oh, I was doing it for the it's like, well, I would have to go back and like take half a bachelor's degree in physics to go from teacher education to ready for. So I was like, do I really want to be a bench physicist? Like,
my discipline. So it was really smooth, right?
It seems like,
Masters.
Okay.
This one is recognized.
So I just want to bring it back and bring the discussion back, and maybe we could have some people report out about variables that they think might be important to successful outcomes or entering into becoming a scientist. So I don't know if anyone wants to sort of report out about something that they thought was an important variable for their own experience.
I can talk.
Okay.
I came backwards to school actually. So I started my bachelor when I was 43 years old. So I was in the workforce. So I had all of these supporting systems. I was teaching other people in the field with experiences. So I came back. So my experience, my academic experience was, really, it's 100% translated, my work into my academia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you, was it while you were working that you learned about different career options or academic fields that you wanted to pursue?
I was already in the field professionally.
Okay.
I just needed the
degree.
scientific part behind it. So it was very different.
Okay. And so that served as a sort of an extra motivation because
Yes.
you were already in the field.
Absolutely.
Anyone else want to share? Okay.
Both my parents came from Poland. They had some type of college background, but I remember even from when I was little, their main thing was to always push us to go to school and to finish school. And now, I mean, I'm here. My brother's, getting his master's in computer science. So it was always having that family backing that
family
was
support.
giving us a lot of encouragement.
Yeah, I think that's common sort of in strong
Yeah.
ethnic groups and a lot of first generation students, having that family support and having them understand your degree. I know my parents did not understand my degree or my desire to go to graduate school. It was definitely a struggle. Anyone else?
We were talking about how a lot of the LS grad students were in the workforce. A lot of us didn't come straight from bachelor's. So I was a teacher. She worked in a school. Lots of people did something else before coming back, and we have other experiences.
And it seems like for the learning sciences, it's like maybe there's a barrier to knowing that it's a field in the first place. Because I certainly didn't know it was something that you could study, and it's great that you guys know. And but yeah, do you have something else to add?
Well, I guess related to that, it wasn't entirely intentional as it happened, but I was a psychology undergrad, and I considered either going into teaching or going further in psychology and studying education-related things. And I had an explicit moment where I was like, I don't like the idea of researchers being a researcher and telling teachers what to do when I have no actual experience in a classroom or life experience or any of that. And so I didn't know for sure that I would come back around after having more time in the field, but it did sort of end up that way.
Yeah, I was just about to discuss it with Mike, but I'll discuss it with everyone.
Okay.
That most of us did not know what exactly learning sciences was, because there's no like undergraduate learning sciences degree. But it's interesting that we have to write these SOPs to apply to graduate schools, and we have to be like really clear about what we want to do and what motivated us to want to do that. And it's really fuzzy at that point, especially when you're just applying. So I actually learned a lot about learning sciences once I came into this program that before, but I had to like talk about some experiences which motivated me to come here. So it was like difficult.
Yeah, I think we're kind of identifying maybe if learning sciences wants to have more students, maybe you guys having more career awareness or discipline awareness.
Yeah, campaign.
Yeah, you guys need marketing, which is what we need in geosciences is actually marketing as well. It's oftentimes we get our majors sort of late in the game. Okay, so thanks for everyone for sharing. As you'll see, I'm still exploring this data set, and so I'm looking for the variables that we think might be important. So again, my pathway was sort of from geoscientist, and now I'm interested in geoscience education. So I'm trained as a seismologist. So I look at squiggles, vibrations from the ground. And that's where I learned to sort of mine data for different trends and patterns. But while I was in graduate school, so this is me as my sort of like confused intern stage.
Y'all just look up, not down.
Yeah. And here's me on my defense day. So for graduate students, that does come, and I stayed amicable with my advisor. It was so funny. I knew I was becoming more interested in education and teaching, especially, but I didn't tell him at first. I thought it was something I had to hide from him because it would be a distraction for my research. But he was actually very supportive. So that led to an opportunity where the last year of my PhD, I was actually able to team teach one of our large introductory courses for both the fall and spring semester. And that's when we taught it hybrid and online. So that was sort of an exciting endeavor and helped me learn about education research. And I also got to be a part of faculty learning communities. So I was sort of interacting with other faculty who are really interested in education research. And then I went straight, my pathway was very direct. And then I came here straight from my PhD. And here I have new opportunities to learn about and promote geoscience education research. And so GER is sort of our acronym of DBER. And like other DBERs, we're sort of interested in advancing teaching and learning. We're interested in the social science research using mixed methods. And then we're focused on geoscience content. GER began to sort of coalesce and pick up steam sort of in the 2000s. Today, there's only about a dozen faculty nationwide that have sort of received a PhD strictly in GER, and about half a dozen have earned tenure in GER. So I would say compared to sort of maybe physics education, engineering education, or chemistry education, GER is a little younger. So we're still forming. But my interest in GER sort of led me to look for partnerships, and so obviously I was interested in my own pathway, and so I called up the former program director, and fortunately he was collecting data for the past 7 years of the program. And the data collection was mostly for evaluation purposes, but there are questions about self-efficacy and desire and interest and some free response sorts of questions. So we looked at pre and post surveys. There were also interviews and written responses. And then we also have alumni tracking from 2010 to 2014. And we're actually, they're planning on releasing the next alumni tracking survey probably in the next couple of weeks. So we're going to use some of the information today. The total number of interns from this time is about 110. On the pre-test, we got 102 respondents. On the post-test, we got about 80 respondents. The paired data sets was about 73. And for tracked alumni, we have about 58. The sort of demographics of the group are 59 female versus 49 male. 33 of the interns came from STEM disciplines, so like physics or chemistry, maybe engineering, so not geoscience specific. And then we have about 18 underrepresented minority groups. So because it was evaluation data initially, we thought we'd focus a little bit on measuring outcomes first. So looking at the overall program influence on participants. And this assumes internship major is indicative of commitment to pursue an advanced degree or career in the geosciences. And we defined 3 different program effects. So are we attracting students? So this is specific for students coming from physics or engineering. Are they, through this experience, this internship experience, are they ultimately interested in pursuing a geoscience degree or career? The other one is retaining students or supporting current geoscience majors. We're just affirming and validating their interest in geoscience and exposing them to research so they decide to continue forward. The third category was detract. So regardless of major, if they were geoscience or STEM, they ultimately decide not to pursue graduate school or a career after this experience. So we have those 3 sorts of categories. And from that, we kind of just made a simple histogram. But about 48 out of 58, or 83% of interns are going on. This is from this latest data set. To earn a geoscience degree or enter the geoscience workforce. Again, from this sort of STEM category, that's the attract and detract, we're actually able to attract about 50% of STEM participants into the geosciences. So we're thinking that that's a viable pathway for us to get more degrees and more workforce ready geoscientists. When I focus on underrepresented students from underrepresented minority groups, the numbers are small, and I also want to make sure to define sort of minority groups in geophysics. We're using like Hispanic, Black, and Native American. Asian and Asian American here is not included because we have a lot of Asian countries that are focused sort of on geophysics because they're in the region of the Ring of Fire. So they're very, so there's a lot of Asians. So there are small numbers currently for underrepresented groups, and this is the tracked group from 2010 to 2014. But of these 6, 4 go on to earn a geoscience degree and pursue a geoscience career. More recent data includes larger numbers of underrepresented minorities, including those from geoscience backgrounds. So we'll see a little bit later how maybe being an underrepresented minority and being from STEM, being kind of outside the geosciences might be difficult for students to be attracted. So again, it's a large data set, and I want to sort of explore different program variables. One of the first questions we had asked was about self-efficacy. And is there a change in self-efficacy, or is it important to persistence in geoscience? Another question I sort of had was what sort of variables might attract and support students from different backgrounds or from STEM disciplines or from underrepresented groups. And then finally, we sort of look for maybe program variables that could be predictors of outcomes. So the first thing we looked at was general self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is the belief that a person is able to control challenging environmental demands by taking adaptive action. This is based off the work from Bandura. And it's generally thought of being domain-specific. And generalized self-efficacy can represent a broad and stable confidence to sort of deal with different challenges and demanding situations. We think that undergraduate research experiences can often be a new challenge or demanding experience for students. For instance, they're used to sort of procedural guidance and planned outcomes versus being maybe in a lab setting or a field setting where they're setting up experiments and conducting experiments and running into roadblocks. That it's a very different sort of lab experience. So we used the General Self-Efficacy Scale. It's a 10-item Likert scale survey developed by Schwartzer and Jerusalem. And we did add a domain-specific item for our purposes, and we administered the self-efficacy scale pre and post. So the first thing to look at here is our histogram of distribution of scores. And here we have sort of a fairly normal distribution, and it's out of 40 points. And so the intern groups, this is pre, are scoring 32.84 as a mean, with a pretty small standard deviation of about 3.4. Compared to the American adult population, the IRIS interns are a few points higher. There's also less spread in the IRIS intern group. And this is the general self-efficacy scale has been confirmed for reliability and validity. So we're thinking, so keep these scores in mind, and then I want to show you sort of a comparison between pre and post, pre-internship, post-internship. So does anyone see anything? It looks pretty similar to me. And when we look at the change in general self-efficacy score, it's centered around 0. So this was, I don't know, I guess sad at first that we had no effect, nothing significant. But then it made us think that perhaps we're coming in with students who already have a high self-efficacy. So they're already sort of at their self-efficacy level that they'll be at. So we did decide to look at sort of look at scores by program effect. So we're trying to see if the pre-general self-efficacy score can be related to program outcomes. So here we have our 3 program outcomes: detract, retain, and attract. And again, they're all very similar. The means are within a few points of each other. So not statistically significant at all. We also then try to look at subgroups. So like for STEM majors, for instance, whether they were detracted or attracted. And again, nothing really stood out to us. We did.
Excuse me, Stephanie, what's the scale that these are on? Is it a Likert scale?
It's a Likert scale. It's a 4-point Likert scale.
Because sometimes those small changes in those, because of the scale, can be more meaningful than they seem. So
Okay. Okay. Maybe. Yeah. No, that's a good idea. It's something I should take a closer look at. We also looked at different subgroups, female versus male, underrepresented minorities, and then a pre and post conference presentation. And we saw similar results. So it seems like there was a lack of statistically significant change in general self-efficacy as a result of the program. We did look at subpopulations, but there was a similar lack of change. And this was actually similar to some results seen by Lorenzo Baber et al. In 2010, who looked at self-efficacy, but this was for high school students after experiencing a 6-week intensive summer program in geosciences. But he did find an increase in self-efficacy for students who returned to the program versus who were new to the program. So it was like the returning students are maybe self-selecting, they already sort of know the routine of the program and are excited about. So we do, maybe this lack of statistically significant changes might be suggesting that students with high self-efficacy are self-selecting into the internship. You have to have those students already overcome a barrier to applying to the internship program. They probably already have a high self-efficacy. And there appears to be no correlation between general self-efficacy scores and student outcomes. So this led us to sort of look at other variables. So one thing that we looked at first was sort of a geoscience career score. And this is where we just were looking at a construct, a domain-specific construct of self-efficacy. So if I want to, I can become a geoscientist. Also looking at their desire and interest. So my desire to pursue a career has increased or decreased. And making a plan. So I will seek a career or seek a degree in this field. So those were all sort of Likert scale as well. And then we also came up with a sort of a group dynamic score. This was a Likert scale of about 10 items. 7 of those items were specific to the intern cohort group. So like I could imagine these people becoming my friends, or we can talk about our concerns as a group. 3 other of the items looked at sort of benefits of the group. And specifically looking at the IRIS intern group that they connect with via cyber infrastructure, and then also the host intern group. So at the host institution are there postdocs, other graduate students, undergrads that the student can interact with, and then the seismology community as a whole. So we wanted to look at, by looking at a group dynamic score, we were hoping to look at students' sense of belonging. Oftentimes, it's sort of been reported that sometimes students will feel isolated, especially in an internship program that is sort of remote. So these are going to be 2 of the measures that we look at going forward. So I looked at them in these subgroups of STEM and underrepresented minorities, and I'll start with some of the STEM major groups. And so again, we're trying to dissuade this physics student and convert them to be a geoscientist. And so we have them separated into attract and detract. And the attracted students are scoring higher on their geoscience career scores. And so this means sort of like at the end of their internship, they're pretty firmly, it's firm in their mind that they can envision interest and a desire, and then that's actually come to fruition where they're actually in a degree program or they're in the workforce already. They also have sort of a high group dynamic score, so they're feeling like they're they have a sense of belonging. And the detract category subgroup of students the geoscience career score is lower. So it's not like at the end of a bad internship they realize months later that it was a really good experience and then they go back. But the thing that I thought was interesting is they really enjoy the group aspect of this program. So they score high on their group dynamic. So things that they're sort of writing in these experts. So this one student was like, I loved my internship. I had no idea what I was going to do with my physics degree. I will be applying to a geophysics graduate program this fall. It's got my mentor was a guide through this graduate school process. It's important to meet other interns and share our fears and expectations. So there's really sort of a sense of being connected with the geoscience content, so having that exposure. They're trusting their mentor. And then there's also a sense of camaraderie and support within the intern group. Other students that were attracted also sort of mentioned a switch in desire and interest with the exposure to geoscience. Also sort of looking at communicating with other interns for that support. This one student who was detracted from the field, she felt like she got a better understanding of what it was like to be a researcher and a graduate student, so she had a vicarious experience, but she wasn't really much interested in what that had to offer. I also looked at this subgroup of underrepresented minority groups, so this is just individual data because we don't have that many. We have, here I think we have 8 or 5, but here we know that some of them have been retained from the alumni tracking data, but we don't have any post scores. You can also see that from this initial underrepresented minority group, we only had 2 geoscientists. We're really trying to, they're just either a lack of exposure of geoscience, or we have to enter into other disciplines to sort of find underrepresented minorities who could be interested in the geosciences. So a lot of them were from STEM backgrounds. And so here in the sort of attract and retain group, we're having high general geoscience career scores. And then a little bit of a range of group dynamic. This student here had the lowest group dynamic, or had like moderate values in geoscience career score and group dynamic, but they ultimately were attracted into the discipline. Other STEM majors have a varying spread. So it's kind of, they're just small numbers here, but we're trying to look for these potential patterns. With more recently collected data, we have sort of 7 additional pre and post surveys collected from 2015 to 2017. And again, those are fruitful or promising. They have a high mean geoscience career score of 12.1. It's out of a 13-point scale. And then an even higher group dynamic. So within the 40s out of a 43-point scale. So this second group, I don't know if we're doing something different, but seems to be more like a cohort. Some of these students who from underrepresented groups, they specifically really write about community. So wonderful sense of community. I've made lifelong professional connections, useful advice from current and recent graduate students. They always have someone to depend on or talk to, and they have information and general knowledge about the culture of the community. So they're really reporting on sort of camaraderie and support, a little bit about sort of seeing what graduate school and research experiences are like. Even students who are detracted from geoscience potentially are also sort of reporting on camaraderie and support. Interns had similar worries, and that helped ease the nerves. And one thing I will say, even about our detracted group, if you remember from the first sort of pathway map, a lot of our detracted group still goes on to graduate school, just not in the geosciences. So with this sort of, with what students are self-reporting on, we're trying to look at their research network. It includes the IRIS intern cohort group. It's often 10 to 15 students. The alumni mentor who's been through an IRIS internship program. It can also include the host institution and the students and researchers there. It can include the science mentor. And then it often includes the orientation instructor. So that's that week-long orientation where students are exposed to different faculty, also working professionals. There's a career panel, things like that. And so it was Caitlin Callahan who suggested that in the geosciences, we really use a lens of social capital to understand diversity. So by increasing the sense of belonging, maybe we can improve our performance of diverse groups. So this helps in building trustworthy relationships as resources and role models. So this becomes, I took a closer look. I saw this trend or this of looking at underrepresented minority participants and also whether they were geoscience or STEM major. And so when we look at majority students, ethnic and racial majority students, their scores for geoscience career score and geodynamic group dynamic score correlate, they're just on top of each other. So they're having sort of the same experience, whether they're a geoscience major or a STEM major. When I split up the underrepresented minority group by geoscience or STEM major, and these are on the same scale, they tend to separate. And so you're not only having a lower geoscience career score, but you're also having a lower group dynamic score when you have maybe the identity of being other outside the discipline, being a STEM major instead of a geoscience major, and then also being a minority instead of part of the racial majority. So this is something we want to explore. Finally, we plotted up this histogram of geoscience career score. It's just 3 items out of a score of 13. And we noticed this skew towards higher scores. And this was similar to our overall sort of positive outcomes of attracting and retaining students for the internship program. So we tried to see if it could be a predictor of the overall outcome. So here we have our program outcomes of detract, retain, and attract. And this became sort of statistically significant when we looked at the attract values, especially compared to detract. And so it seems like the score, even though it's just based on 3 items, really tends to be a predictor of overall outcomes a year, 2 years, 3 years after the program. So once the interns go through the program, they pretty definitively know whether research or grad school is for them or geoscience is for them. This also is true for if we looked at subgroups of geoscience majors and STEM majors, that we have the similar predictors of whether students will be retained or attracted with higher scores in the geoscience career indicator. And again, this was true for underrepresented minority groups as well. So, in conclusion, I'd say there are a lot of sort of undergraduate research experiences out there. RAUs are sort of common. Even on campus, we have Lazary. There's a big push for undergraduate research. And there's been some documentation of outcomes. I think it could be better. I think we're still working to build that database. But also, I think there's need to better understand why those outcomes are occurring. And so this has been documented in recent papers by Lynn and Rob Nett. And specifically, looking at understanding those outcomes from research experiences, we need to focus on specific populations. So for us, it's I looked at STEM majors and also underrepresented groups, but it could be female population, it could be returning student population, something like that. Additionally, there is a need for longitudinal studies. Oftentimes, research experiences are just, the week after your internship, you get a post-survey, and it's self-reporting. It's often self-reporting about your plans. But with a longitudinal study, we can track where those students are. We're able to look at their workforce and degree pathway. And so a lot of this study, this work, can justify and optimize financial and staff resources that support undergraduate research programs. So with our data specifically, the IRIS internship program has a rich data set to explore variables associated with program outcomes. There's a strong track record currently of students pursuing geoscience degrees and careers from the program. But we didn't change, there's no obvious change in self-efficacy, maybe because students are already coming in with a high self-efficacy, and we do see that they persist through. There's a new opportunity to explore other variables like post-geoscience career score and maybe group dynamic score to show us the potential influences on outcome. We could also look at quality of mentoring, mastery, skill development, or like impact of conference presentations. Additionally, we're enthusiastic about this 3-item geoscience career score to test it more to see if it could be a reliable predictor of student outcomes multiple years after the internship experience.